Hello, and welcome to the Tennessee Informer. Thank you for joining us tonight. Tonight, with the Tennessee fair elections, we have Aundrea Gomez and Kathy Harms with us, two experts on election integrity issues here in Tennessee. We've had them on the show several times before and glad to have them back. How are you ladies doing tonight?
Excellent. Thank you for asking. Thanks for having us.
It's always good to have you. It's always you have a good Christmas and having a good New Year so far.
Yeah, off to the races. 2026. Turn the page.
Already feels busy. The month is halfway almost, or is.
Well,
I don't even know what the day is. It's the 15th. Yeah, we're halfway through January.
Absolutely.
I like the beard.
Oh,
I like the beard.
Thank you. Yeah, I'll keep it for a while, at least until it starts getting hot.
So hopefully that'll be soon.
I don't think so. This is only January. We're not going to get off that easy. It'll be late March.
Yeah.
Maybe early April. So session's already back in, and I know you guys have some legislation. We'll talk about that here in a little bit. But you guys have been busy in the off season, I guess you could call it, and a lot of different things going on, not just in Tennessee as far as election issues go, but across the country. So why don't you fill in the public on what you're dealing with, what they need to know about, and then we'll talk a little bit about some of the solutions / legislation.
Okay. Well, Kathy, do you want to start, or you want me to start?
Well, go ahead.
Well, okay. So we like to start all of our conversations about election integrity in the state of Tennessee with 3 anchors. Okay. So to begin with, we have the U.S. Citizens Elections Bill of Rights. That is like our founding document, not just Tennessee fair elections, but for other state coalitions that focus on election integrity, just like we do across the country. There's over 30 now through the Election Integrity Network. So this was a list of 10 principles for a permanent infrastructure for election integrity and election security. So everything we do is through this lens. And then we have 2 other anchors that we can tie into this conversation. One being the executive order from President Trump in February of 2025 and the agenda that he laid out, the America First agenda, and it very much aligns with that U.S. Citizens Elections Bill of Rights. We call it CBOR for short because it's such a mouthful. So things like eliminating QR codes from the ballots. I believe he had returning to election day in there, ensuring that only citizens are registering, requiring proof of citizenship to register to vote, things like that. And then the last anchor for our conversation is the Rasmussen poll that also came out last year. And I neglected to share a screenshot of that, but we do have that on our website. So if anyone's interested, they can go to tnfairelections.org and they can see the results of that polling. And it aligns with CBOR. It also aligns with the Trump executive order. So American voters overwhelmingly support what's in the Elections Bill of Rights and what Trump put in his America First agenda for election integrity. So those are the 3 anchors for, that we use that lens to look at the problems that we're having in Tennessee, and also for when we're presenting solutions for those problems in Tennessee.
Go ahead.
Nope, your turn.
Are there any of those anchors that Tennessee is currently meeting to standard?
Well, I guess it depends on who you ask.
A voter ID is one of the big ones, right? You're hearing a lot about that now, that it's a no-brainer that we should have an identity to vote. And we do have a voter ID in the state of Tennessee. Is it as complete as it needs to be based on, since the time it was passed to where we are today? We think it's missing some very key elements to it, such as citizenship. And I know that in special session last year, they talked about something that we've known about for 3 years, and that is on our driver's licenses. If you're not a U.S. citizen, it's supposed to say temporary and have a special class. It already has that. And last year in special session, they added the one category of those non-citizens that it doesn't say temporary, and that's the permanent legal residence. Let's say you're married to somebody from the UK and they're never going back to the UK. They'll be here forever. Their driver's license would look like yours and mine, so they changed that. But we weren't checking that ID for citizenship at the polls, and there was nothing in the special session that said check it at the polls. So in that regard, we are hoping to just tweak that a bit. So it's not that we don't have voter ID, and I think it's a very good thing that we have voter ID, but I think in order to make it more than just matching the face of the person standing in front of you to that, it should have both your citizenship, and the other big key is your residency. Where do you live? Because on your passport, it doesn't indicate if you are a Tennessee resident because there's no address on it. So we're trying to just firm those things up. And another big key is we want it to be unexpired and we want it to be physical. As you also might know, last year, a pilot program was passed by the General Assembly for digital driver's licenses, which includes a lot of things. It's kind of a little concerning. It does say in that bill that ID cannot be used for voting. However, we feel that in the ID section of our code, it should say you're not just that you can't use digital ID, but all ID must be physical. It must be a physical piece so that we never get to the place, that slippery slope where all of a sudden everybody's got a digital driver's license and they want to present it at the polls. And someone will say, well, why shouldn't we? Well, we want to codify that in law.
So how does a digital driver's license work? It doesn't have a photo?
You know what? They're rolling that out as a pilot. I didn't get too into the weeds on that. It's not quite my lane. I know it can also collect biometric data, which I'm not so sure is a great idea. I was really happy to hear that the UK just recently overwhelmingly rejected digital ID. I think it's a slippery slope, but when it comes to elections, we just want to make sure that little rabbit doesn't get under the fence and get into our voter ID.
Absolutely.
So Dave, your question about, what are we doing in Tennessee? We actually have been doing that presentation with our group of volunteers and for others that we've invited as guests to view that presentation, where we walk through every article from the U.S. Citizens Elections Bill of Rights, and we lay out exactly what we have and also what's missing that we should be, working on.
Yeah. Okay.
So that's.
Well, I knew you had been working on it, but I just was curious if there was anything of those anchors that, okay, all right, Tennessee is doing this good on this portion of the anchor, but we need work on X, Y, or Z.
I wouldn't say that any of those 10 principles, I don't think we have any of them completely buttoned up in Tennessee. I would say we have a little bit of each one, but we have room to improve on each one as well.
And I would say that would be normal when, a lot of bills are passed and 10 years go by and the environment changes. And so you should go back and revisit those things and tweak them and make them better. And like Aundrea said, we show people, here's what we have, here's what we need to work on. We compare and contrast because there are some things that we do well.
Okay. Now, what was the, you mentioned the Rasmussen poll, and the majority of Americans agree with that. And that also is in line with the executive order from last year from President Trump. And I obviously I don't follow this as close as you guys do, but I know that it wasn't too long ago. And this also involved, I think, maybe the letter from the DOJ that was, I'm assuming, based off the executive order. And our state was initially kind of balking at going along with that. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, that you're talking the voter rolls and the doging of voter rolls. And people in the United States overwhelmingly want cleaner voter rolls. They all want them. They want to know that the person that's showing up at the polls is an eligible voter. They want to make sure that we don't have spaces in our voter rolls where you could have the quote unquote phantom voter, which happens in other states. And it's it's a vulnerability that we should not have. And it also affects whether or not what we're looking at in terms of what is our voter turnout. If you don't have the right number of people on your voter rolls and you're including them in the voter turnout, your denominator is incorrect. So we have been trying on a lot of different things, because going along with that, with the Dojin of the voter rolls and the DOJ, is the idea that we know what's in them, that they're transparent, that this is a public record. The National Voters Rights Act from the 1990s, Registration Act, I should say, it put certain rules together for registering to vote. But one of those sections in those rules was to make all the work, all the public, all the work that's being done for list maintenance, to keeping your voter rolls clean, that should be a public record. The public should have the right to know. So for over a year, we've been trying, because we have been working with the Election Integrity Network and people from across the country on this Only Citizens Vote push, to make sure we only have citizens on our voter rolls. And so for over a year ago, we started making public records requests asking how many non-citizens since May of 2024 have been identified and or removed from the voter rolls. And we can't get that data. The state has resisted giving us that data. Well, Judicial Watch back in December wrote a letter to the state and asked also for that data, saying it is a federal law that they should release that public record. And they took it a step further and said, because this is a public record, you're making it incredibly difficult for the people in the state of Tennessee to access those records, because, believe it or not, it's $2,500 a month to get the state voter rolls. And some states, like Ohio, they're on their website. And Judicial Watch even cited California and North Carolina, bigger states than Tennessee, and how much more reasonable. We are one of the highest, $2,500 a month. And the money that they get for that goes into the machine fund, which is not something we want anyway. And so it's like, why we can't even do list maintenance. If we can't access it because it costs so much, and you can't access it because the state won't release a public records request, Judicial Watch got involved. Now we find that the DOJ has been asking for this information since August. Our state elections are touting the fact that they were part of this this pilot program. They were one of the first to turn over their records to the DOJ, right? Well, what they don't tell you is they're not identifying anything to the public of what they have found. And one of the things that you just saw in the news in this last week is that the DOJ is asking them to remove people from the voter rolls, and they're not doing it, and we don't quite understand why. But the second piece is, if they could release the voter rolls to the DOJ, there's not a special privilege for the DOJ. Those public records should have been released to us too. We should have access to them. So it's a sticky wicket here with this voter roll thing, because the other major thing that Trump was able to do was, through the Department of Homeland Security, there was a program. It's called the SAVE system, and it checks people to see if they're citizens. You can run your voter rolls. Well, in 2024, the state of Tennessee's General Assembly passed a law mandating that the state run our voter rolls through the DHS program. And then whatever they find, they take to the county. Well, the great news was, in April, the Department of Homeland Security figured out a way to do a couple things. First of all, they made that process so you used to only do one registration at a time. Well, now they can put the entire voter roll through and a county could get this information in a matter of minutes. It's free, and the counties can now access it. It used to be only the state could do it. But now the counties across the country, if you're an election official, Murray County, Williamson County, whatever county you live in, if you're an election official, the Department of Homeland Security, starting in April, said, you can enter into a memorandum of agreement with us, and we'll run your voter rolls for you before you put somebody on the voter rolls. That's the critical thing here, before. Unfortunately, a letter went out from our state coordinator of elections office that told counties that they can't do it. Now the counties
on what? Can't do it based on what?
They said you don't have you haven't been given the authority by the General Assembly. Well, how could the General Assembly give you authority to do something that was never possible? Number one. And number two, the authority comes from the federal government to do this. I mean, states like Arizona, who have a very difficult an adversarial relationship with their Secretary of State, they said the same thing to their counties, and their county said, I'm doing it. We're checking this. Because once you put somebody on the voter rolls, it's much more difficult to remove them than it is to check it before they get on the voter rolls and say, you know what, before we put you on the voter rolls, you were flagged. Can you give us this data, this other information? And we do know that we've had people that have been removed for non-citizen status in the state. But the counties tell us, if they would let us do this ourselves, we wouldn't have to wait for the state to do it. We don't know how often the state does it. And we could do it when we get a batch of new registrants. We could just run it through. And it's free. It doesn't cost the state a penny.
I'm surprised that the state, that they're allowed to keep that kind of, I mean, because even at the state level, you have the ability to do FOIAs. And I'm just surprised that it would be legal for them to keep it from us. And you said $2,500 a month. You don't mean it's not a one-time fee?
No, to buy, you have to pay for, if I wanted the state voter rolls, it would cost me $2,500 a month. You can get a deal if you get a subscription for the year, but that is a lot of money for grassroots organizations. So we did buy them in July. We did purchase them. We had some people who came up and gave us a donation. They purchased them. And so we've been working because we know that our counties are under the gun. These election workers do a great job and they have a lot of work to do. So we've been looking at voters who haven't voted in more than 2 federal elections, because we're supposed to send them a postcard, move them to inactive. We've been helping. We found, for instance, in one county, 9 people registered at a food pantry. Well, there's no beds in that food pantry. So they went to the county. The county went and checked it out and said, you are absolutely right. These are invalid registrations. And so we've been able to help counties, and we could do more of that if we were able to access the voter rolls.
Right.
But it's very prohibitive. And so Judicial Watch would like to have a conversation with our state to ask them to do a better job with that. We've had citizens ask, because the person who is in charge of that this doesn't require legislation. One person in our state could change it, and that's the Secretary of State. It's totally up to him to set that fee. He could change it immediately. He does not need legislation.
And who runs the actual elections? That's Mark Goins, right?
Correct.
Okay.
Correct.
Yeah, I've heard that name before. Usually, well, I'll just leave it at that. Anyway, it doesn't have a very good reputation on that kind of stuff. So, wow, $2,500 a month for something that can be done for free, and something that we as citizens should be allowed to get.
And
other states provide it for free.
Many states do. They put it right on their website every month. They
California
wrote the
doesn't
report
charge
anyway. We're not asking for a new report. They have the report.
What'd you say, Aundrea?
I said even California doesn't charge this much.
Good Lord. And so but they said the reason why is that you're not entitled to it, or there's not a law that authorizes you to have it. Is that their excuse?
Well, there's 2 parts. The fee itself is set by the Secretary of State. The ability for the counties to run their registrations through the Department of Homeland Security, they've been told by the state they're not authorized to do it. Why, I don't know. So we're hoping legislation can fix that. It shouldn't have to. You would think we would be jumping up and down saying, thank you. We can now let our counties do this. It takes the burden off the state. However, that's not what's happening.
Yeah. Well, maybe someday soon somebody will sit down and have a beer with our Secretary of State and get him straightened out on this.
A beer summit.
Maybe at a concert.
Beer summit. But where's the concert place again? We're Bonnaroo. We'll talk about it at Bonnaroo. Anyway, it just popped up in the thing in the chat here. And guys, I apologize. I'm not able to respond to the chat, but I can see them. Possible kickback? Any idea if there's where that $2,500 is going?
We know it goes into election machine fund. I suppose we could FOIA, itemized receipts out of that fund and find out exactly what that money is being spent on, but that's where it goes.
Okay. All right. So
for your listeners, the answer to the question, how clean or dirty are the voter rolls for Tennessee? We don't really know. We don't really have an answer to that question at this time. We would like to.
We are finding a lot of people who should be inactive. Oh, and we are finding people, this is a big one for you. We're finding people, I think there's 5,000 of them right now, registered at student unions and libraries on college campuses. And the last time I looked, there are no beds in a student union or in a library. And students, and the last thing is as a resident, that's not a permanent resident. That's not a residency that is year round. That's a school. And the real fun thing about that is we've got 80-year-olds, 70-year-olds, 50-year-olds. The average age, I think, is 25 that in these registrants. They're not, some of them are inactive now, but we shouldn't be having anybody getting registered on a college campus. They are not, that's not a residency. We have rules for residency. Why they're being allowed to be registered there, we don't know. And we have.
So that's in the counties where they're registering that they're being allowed to do that.
Correct. And we've pushed back on that at the state level, and they're kind of like fudging it around with some kind of that as if there were a loophole of allowing it. But a commercial site is not a site. And, really you could argue that as a college campus, but because it doesn't say you can't register at a college campus, they do.
Okay. So, Trump did the EO last year about this time. Mm-hmm. And, you would have thought in Tennessee, as popular as Trump is in Tennessee, that we would have just complied right away. And I understand there are some issues in terms of what states' responsibilities and state powers, and I'm a big guy on that, but I don't, I don't understand why our state government does not seem to be really focused on making sure somebody told them they were doing a good job and patted them on the back. And so now it's like, oh, we don't need to talk about election integrity. We're good to go. And we don't need to do anything else. That's the impression I get from hearing people from within our state government talk.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, that is what you hear.
So what are the solutions? What bills do we have pending? What needs to happen?
Mm-hmm.
What's the first thing that needs to happen?
Well, we do have 6 bills that we want to share with your audience today. We'll walk through them. We don't have bill numbers just yet. As soon as we have bill numbers, we will be putting the bills up on our website, and we'll be sharing on social media as well, as we do with everything. So these solutions are really geared towards an America First election integrity agenda. That's the bottom line. This is about protecting your vote, protecting American citizens, protecting security, integrity, transparency of our elections. All right, so you ready? We'll start with the first one. The Neighborhood Voting Act. We gave them names because we don't have bill numbers for you. So hopefully your audience can remember the names and listen, and it will connect for them what this is about. So we used to always vote in our precincts, and your precinct was essentially in your neighborhood, right? So you could walk, or, it was maybe a very short drive to get to your precinct where you would vote. And you probably knew the people that were there, maybe running the election, definitely knew some of the other voters because they were your neighbors. Well, over the last, I don't know, would you say like 10 years or so, Kathy, we've been moving more and more out of the precinct voting, whether it's during the early voting period or on election day. It varies across the state. Every county has some form of voting in a centralized location. And in our county and in several counties across the state, they are using convenience vote centers. So think centralized, reducing the number of precincts or locations where voters can go to cast their vote So you've got people from lots of different precincts anywhere in the county showing up at a centralized location to cast their vote and everything that goes along with that. So would you think that that would be easier or harder to handle hand-marked paper ballots if everyone's going to a centralized location? Probably harder, right?
Yeah, it's going to be a problem.
Right. So that's how we get tied into some of these other issues, like the ballot marking devices and the scanning, the tabulators and all of that. So the Neighborhood Voting Act aligns with, guess what? Our state constitution, which says that you are to vote in your
Precinct where you reside.
where you
Wait a minute,
reside.
you're telling me we're already violating, this is another one of those laws we passed that violates our state constitution, just kind of like the vouchers?
Well, and they do it one county at a time, and they've never asked the people if they wanted to be in vote centers. You and I have never voted on that at our county level. So
Right.
the county election commission just decides that they want to do a pilot program for a convenience vote center. And then they have their legislator run a bill, and the legislature passes that without question, really. And then voila, they're in a pilot program for a convenience vote center. The problem is there's no sunset on the pilot program. It never ends. We don't know how you can get out of a vote center once you are in a vote center. So we think that's a problem.
Check out anytime you like, but you can never leave.
Yeah.
Right.
What do you call that? The Hotel California?
Yeah, and almost every county does use some form of vote centers on early voting.
Yeah.
Almost,
Absolutely.
yes,
Absolutely.
they all do. And I was on a call yesterday with an election worker in a very large county in Pennsylvania. They were astounded to hear how we vote. As bad as you might think Pennsylvania has been, they vote by precinct. They never commingle their ballots by precinct. So the bill that's coming forward says, listen, I don't care if it's early voting or election day, you have to vote by precinct. If you don't have enough precincts locations during your early vote period, you can do like Pennsylvania does. You could put maybe 4 precincts together, but when you get there, you go to your precinct person, you cast your ballot, and your ballot stays in the precinct. How else are you ever going to audit a process by precinct if those ballots are all mixed up? So this guy, he's a statistician, and I was talking to him about audits, really, but he just couldn't believe his ears that we do these vote centers, especially when you have 50 to 80% of our vote is cast early, and almost everybody's voting in a vote center. That is an astounding number.
Couple of things here from the chat. Somebody brought in when we were talking earlier about the registrations that are accepted, like from the school unions and whatnot. What are those counties? Have those counties been reported to the state? Has anybody tried to make say, wait a minute, who's responsible for allowing this? Has anybody made a push on that? Obviously, you guys are trying to fix the issue, but I'm talking about the fact that they broke the law.
Well, that's the whole thing. We tried to firm that law up, and we couldn't get it passed because technically they're coming at it kind of squishy on this. If you read our statutes, they're not always so buttoned up. And so they're trying to say, well, technically we could kind of do this. And so we tried getting legislation and it went nowhere.
Another point was brought up here. There's somebody that has, it's whoever Tinted Bits. That's the name here. I have an adult daughter with special needs, can't read or write, and does not want to vote. I can't believe how hard state agencies push her to get registered to vote from all different sources. So have you heard of those type of things happening?
Well, I can go a step further. We had a person who was a non-citizen, didn't speak English, we got a phone call, and because their interpreter was had her at an agency, like you can register at other agencies, and that agency wanted her to give her a application to vote, and she said she's not a citizen, and she translated to the non-citizen. The lady said, no, I'm not a citizen. She kept telling her, get her to register to vote anyway. We did have that, did get reported to the state to come down on that agency. but it is difficult because you have third parties also coming in to places trying to get people registered to vote. And so I really feel bad when you have a situation with those, we call that person, which your viewer, those are vulnerable voters. And we need to protect the most vulnerable in our culture. And those are people in nursing homes or assisted living or disabled. And that shouldn't be allowed. Somebody should be monitoring that. It is unfortunate.
So we don't have numbers yet. What's the next, the title of the next bill?
I'll just say one more thing. A lot of our bills, like I think you recognized, are connected, right?
Yeah.
So they kind of all touch each other. And you'll find that with that Neighborhood Voting Act, that really is key to a lot of other things. Mm-hmm. So many of your viewers may, in the last 5 years, been in support of removing the voting machines. Mm-hmm. And to Kathy's point about the commingling of ballots, if you're voting in a vote center and they are presenting a different ballot for every voter because there's so many different precincts coming in and the ballots are getting commingled and all of that, it's going to be much more feasible to go back to a secure hand-marked paper ballot once you're out of vote centers and back into your neighborhood precinct.
Yeah,
so they do. There's a lot of push and pull on these bills here. So, okay, ready for the next one. The next one is Election Day Empowerment Act.
Election Day Empowerment. Okay.
Yeah, they're fun names, right? Okay, yeah. So we've moved away from an election day, and we've moved into election season. Kathy, we have like 20 days of early voting. And so there's several issues with that. Obviously, the more days that you have of voting, with the other vulnerabilities, then you're going to have more vulnerabilities, right? There's something that sometimes gets overlooked because not each of us hasn't had the experience of running for office, right? And being a candidate. So if you talk to candidates, once they have run their own campaign, they will wholeheartedly tell you that all of those early voting days are incredibly difficult, frustrating, time-consuming, expensive, all the things for a campaign as a candidate. But that's not really why we want to run this bill. Returning to election day is key for closing the door on some of these vulnerabilities that we have. And I'll let Kathy expand a little bit more on that because she's really the subject matter expert on this particular issue.
Well, you have places like in Virginia, 45 days of early voting. You can swing an election, late breaking news, you've already cast your ballot. We had a special election in D7 just recently, and some candidates kind of pulled out by election day. Well, people have cast their ballot already. And that's not a good thing. So we're recommending, because we know that people, feel like they should have some time to be able to vote. We want to tighten up two things. Number one, we want to tighten up who votes absentee by mail. We have a very good program on that, but we think that age is not a disability. You should be truly disabled if you can't get it to the election office. But if you can, 8 days should be the max. 8 days, 5 to 8 days. And depending on the county, they should be able to make that decision, because that way you don't have all the other cost issues of how many days you have to have polls open, how many people have to man the polls, and you're securing your ballots a lot better if you reduce the amount. And that is overwhelming national support to get, the people don't want, most of the people want election day, and the president himself wants election day. But even if we could just rein it in a little bit, it would be a big help to everybody.
Well, it's actually, Kathy, the number is 66% from the Rasmussen poll. 66% of those polled support a maximum of 5 days of early in-person voting.
That's about 4 days too many, in my opinion. I'm all for 1 day, and make it a national holiday or something, and everybody votes.
Yeah.
I guess I could go with 3 max, but I think 1 would. I think once it was 1 for years, years and years. It was 1.
And there's always emergency or absentee voting. There's always those cases. So that's not a problem.
There's like 3 states, and I'm not going to remember which ones there are, but there are some states that don't do early voting.
Well, Kentucky is one of them, and that's just our neighbor to the north. Technically, Pennsylvania doesn't do early voting. So there's a lot of states that don't do it, 3 states at least. And there's been a lot of documentation on this that we've offered to our legislators now. Papers that have been written, documentation to show that it's a higher cost to vote early on a lot of levels, including security, and it doesn't pay off. It does not increase. It has not been proven to increase voter turnout, and that was the reason for it. It is not. Even nationally, even the most far left-leaning organizations have done studies, and it has not moved the needle.
So it's always been the excuse to have more days, but that's not holding water.
No.
And I'm like what you said, that's more opportunities for people to cheat. That's more opportunity for people that shouldn't be voting to vote.
Right.
So,
and more days means more administrative costs.
Yep.
We promote the idea of citizens being poll watchers and having eyes on the process. If you're trying to schedule people for 20, 30 days of early voting, and people can't be there for a 12-hour shift, so they can maybe do 2 hours or 4 hours. Well, you need a lot of people trained to be poll watchers, and these are volunteer positions. So it's quite a strain on the election workers too, to have that many days. So.
And another angle on this, and I know it's probably not one that's been brought up, but it's, to me, the way I see it, we do this in the primaries as well. Well, the primaries, those are private parties. The parties are private. The parties should be covering that. The state should not be paying for party primaries.
I'm with you.
Because that's more that the taxpayer has to cover. So if we're going to have primaries, and if we're going to have 10, 12, whatever, how many days, the parties should cover that.
Hey, I come from a state that did caucuses. Loved it. One night.
Yeah. So what's the next?
The next one is the Ballot Transparency Act.
Okay.
And transparency because the smartest person that I know doesn't know how to read QR code or barcode. Right. And I know you're pretty smart, Dave, but do you know how to read a QR code or a barcode? No. So I haven't met anybody yet that can.
And that's by design. That is by design. Don't doubt it.
And yet that's where your vote has been encoded when you are casting your ballot. So you go to, say, a ballot marking device, you make your selections on a screen, and it prints your ballot out. When you take that ballot and you feed it into the tabulator is reading the barcode or the QR code. And so you are not able to look at your ballot and verify that what the tabulator is reading are actually your selections.
Right. And that impacts post-election audits. How are you ever going to know that what you're really auditing was really the voter's intent? And then that also goes to, there are barcodes on, this goes back to these vote centers. When you go to a vote center that has what's called an electronic poll book, that poll book is telling the computer, it spits out a piece of paper with a barcode on it so that when you go over to the computer to vote, you're putting in the right ballot type, it's reading the barcode. And a lot of people don't know if they got the right ballot. If you have a hand-marked paper ballot in a precinct, you have some security and you have a way to reverse engineer and audit the paper. You can touch the paper and make sure you had how many were spoiled, how many were ordered, you have chain of custody, you have a lot. Right now you have a pile of papers, or you have a DRE machine that's behind a glass. So we want transparency because we should have voter verifiability, and we should have a way to count those ballot by numbers, to say 600 ballots were issued, 20 of them were spoiled. So we've got 580 here in the bin, and we know we have the right number. And then if we ever really wanted to audit, if the machine read them correctly, we have eyeballs that we can read the voter's intent.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe we have to go back to what they used to do. You would walk in, and this is way back, you'd walk in and they'd ask you who you were voting for. And you would say, I'm voting for so-and-so. That's the way we used to do in the old days. Granted, we got a lot more people now.
You're not that
But
old.
what? No. I'm saying way. I'm talking about way back.
Oh, okay.
No, I'm not that old. But this idea that, well, it's nobody's business who I vote for. If you're going to vote for somebody, hey, I think you should be willing to go up there and say, hey, this is who I support.
But this is another one of those initiatives that the president supports, America First. It's overwhelmingly supported by the people of the United States. They want to mark their own ballot. They don't want QR codes, and they don't want an electronically generated ballot. They want to fill out their own ballot. And I say we should let them.
59% support hand-marked paper ballots only, no touch screens.
When did I'm trying? Do either one of you know when we first started using machines?
Oh, we've been using machines for years. They just the new iterations after 2020, after the hanging chads, they became more electronic. IBM was involved with all this before that, but it seems like since 2020, since 2000, since the Help America Vote Act, it's just been ramped up. And guess who tells the companies that do the checking to see, certify these machines? The vendors tell that company what to check. So who's checking the checker? People are not confident in those electronically generated ballots. We should allow people to vote on a hand-marked paper ballot. We have had counties in the state of Tennessee that have bucked the trend, and they did a hand-marked paper ballot. And in 2024, Murray County did all hand-marked paper ballots in the primary and in the general. People's average time in and out was 16 minutes, and they all were so appreciative for having a hand-marked paper ballot.
Hey, I'm all for it. I am all for it.
Hey, you want to hear the good news? It doesn't take legislation to do that in the state of Tennessee, because we used to do it that way, and it's still on the books.
It's grandfathered in the county. Any county can do it if they want to.
Any county can do it, but the state won't recommend it.
They won't recommend it, and they've pushed these machines, and a lot of counties have already spent money on the machines. So they're like, well, we spent the money. We got to do it. And I'm like, no, well, you probably shouldn't have spent the money. Now you should do what, the right thing. So. And
it's not going to cost them more, because when they have the machines, they're paying for IT, they're paying for software updates. And with a ballot marking device, or ballot on demand, they still need to have paper. We have taken a paper ballot to the legislature several times since we've been doing this, and we've been rejected every time. So because we had a secure one, watermarks, all kinds of needs of security. Can't get it done. We can't get that.
We're not talking scratch paper here. We're talking something that you can secure to some degree.
Well, that's actually, the scratch paper is kind of what the ballots look like now. In my county, when you walk in, they've got a stack of like these long, skinny ballots, and they're blank, and they kind of have like a little clip on one corner of them. And there's just stacks of them. There's no accounting for how many of those ballots are actually there.
But you've heard the president say, get rid of those QR codes, get rid of those barcodes.
All right, we're gonna have to go through these last couple kind of fast.
Let's do this real quick.
Next one is Only Citizens Vote Act. That's kind of self-explanatory, right?
Yeah, in theory.
Yeah.
And I think we touched on that with the voter rolls already, and being able to check to make sure only citizens get on our voter rolls.
Yeah. So at the federal level, there is legislation to make it a requirement to check for citizenship when someone registers. So that's at the federal level. That has to be done through the NVRA. At the state level, though, we know that when someone presents a temporary driver's license, we know that they can check that and ensure that only citizens are voting in our elections, because we have the identifier on the license.
But they have to be taught that. The election officials have to be taught that. They have to know what to look for. Now, I think last year, didn't they have a bill that was going to make it easier to see, make the letters bigger or something?
What they did last year is two things. First of all, they passed in special session to change that driver's license up. But the second thing was there was legislation passed mandating that the state coordinator of elections train the election workers to check it at the polls, because that's the key. I don't care how much is on there. If they're not going to check it at the polls, what difference does it make?
Right.
But the key is to keep them off the voter rolls using that Department of Homeland Security tool. So we have tools.
Yep. All right, the next one is Residency Integrity Act. Now, so you would think in a state like Tennessee that we would not let someone vote in Tennessee if they had never actually lived in Tennessee, right?
Yeah, I would think.
Sounds like common sense. Well, that's
Yeah.
not the case.
Okay. If you
Okay,
live,
so
all right.
I got to hear this one.
Okay. There's a federal law called UOCAV. It's the Uniform Overseas Citizens Absentee Voting Act. Okay. So that's most people think of the military, right? They're,
Right.
you know, they're voting absentee. Well, there's also people who live overseas that are expats. Their business might have them overseas. A student might be overseas for a semester. However, in our law, when it comes to that UOCAV, the residency requirement is only if you've never lived here ever. Let's say you were raised in, your parents were lived in France, you were raised in France, you can register to vote. When you put in an application, you're asking for a ballot. You can do that if there was an address where your parents would have lived, or had lived. Well, that's not you. If you are able to vote, you are not a minor. You're an adult, right?
Right.
You should have, our state constitution says you must be a resident of the state of Tennessee to vote in Tennessee. Our laws, our election law says you have to be a resident. So we want to strike that language out of our current code, because if you've never resided here, and other states are catching on, because I think it's 32 other states are like us. And so they're all going about this methodically, creating this scratch that says if you've never resided here, you cannot register here.
Do we know how many people voted in Tennessee or voted overseas into Tennessee?
Well, what we're finding is that number is getting to be an uptick. Right now, 67% of the UOCAV vote is overseas. And in Tennessee specifically, we're seeing an increase in that activity because there are NGOs, you've heard of what those are, the overseas, putting out signs everywhere telling people, vote, get registered to vote. You can vote in America. And so I had a case where someone called me and said, I got an email from somebody from Italy and they want to vote here. I don't know who they are. They don't have a residency here, but according to the law, they could register. So you got to remember, they're voting in your local elections too. They're voting for your sheriff. They're voting for your school board. They're voting for your county commissioners. They should not have that right. And so they can easily flip a local election. We're probably not so much a federal election, but they could easily flip a local election. So we're just going to work on trying to strike that. We worked on it last year, but we couldn't get it over the finish line.
And
that should be a no-brainer. I don't know who argues against that.
Oh,
well,
but can I just repeat the statistic that Kathy shared? She said 67% of those voters that are overseas are not military. They're overseas citizens. So predominantly non-military voters.
There's some work being done on that at the federal level, by the way, because the NGOs have been doing this. And you know what they're trying to do? They're trying to get the camel's nose under the tent and use the excuse of overseas to let them return a ballot by the internet. Can you imagine the nightmare we'd have if we had internet voting?
All right.
It's bad enough that we got illegals voting here now. People who are not even in the country
with no proof, and they don't have to provide documented proof of citizenship in the state of Tennessee.
That's just a special kind of stupid. I can't believe we allow these type of things in Tennessee.
Well, remember, a lot of these laws were passed before these things were really big things. But the key is you have to, just like your car, you have to tune it up. Just like your house, you got to kind of sometimes bring the decorator in and fix it up a little bit. Right.
But I mean, how does it make sense if they've never lived here? That they could even, how would anybody even think that you could even register, or that just doesn't make sense.
Well,
you've never lived here.
Well, it doesn't just violate the law, it violates the state constitution. That is very clear. You must be a resident.
Yeah.
So it violates the Constitution, but we don't have a specific law, so they get by with it.
Well, I think it's again one of those little things that it's one of those things that got past the goalie. And so now it's time to go back in and correct it. You can't really blame people when it wasn't a problem in the past, I guess.
Oh,
Okay, the last one, the Authentic Voter Act. We want to make sure.
We just talked about the inauthentic voter, so now we'll talk about the authentic voter.
There you go. So at the beginning, we were talking about voter ID, right? And, you know, most people believe that we've got that squared away in Tennessee. We have voter ID. And as Kathy explained, we have an ID, we have a voter ID that is matching the picture to the person standing in front of you. But there are things that we could do to make it even better.
Yep. Yeah. So we're using some good examples from around the country and giving all the data, all the background, all the legal support for this to just make it better. Not that we don't have it, but just let's make it better.
So now you have all these bills. They all have sponsors. They'll all be ran this year.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
You want to tell us who the sponsors are?
Well, we're very fortunate. Jody Barrett is going to get us back to precincts and get us back to that ballot. He ran that bill already several years ago, and it went nowhere. But these are America First, right? Todd Warner's an America First guy. He's going to run a bill to make sure that we allow the counties to check that Department of Homeland Security database. Monty Fritz is really gung-ho on voter ID. We've got a couple other legislators running a few other bills on the ballot. And ballot transparency is Jody, but we have somebody for everything. And then the Senate, we are really confident in the Senate that we have the sponsors there. That because the House is now reduced to 10 bills.
Right.
Oh, and reducing the number of early voting days. We have a sponsor for that.
Good. What's going to go down to 8? You say? Is it 8?
A maximum of 8. Our recommendation is that they can. It's up to the county. Some counties just don't have the need for it, and so why mandate them to have 8 days if they don't have to have it, and if their county doesn't want it? So between 5 to 8 at the most. We're giving them some latitude.
So now, do these bills go through mainly? They'll go through the same committee.
They go through the subcommittee on elections in the House.
Okay.
And then they go to the full committee in the House. And they also have to go to state and local in the Senate.
Okay.
That's Briggs in the Senate.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm assuming, I haven't looked at it lately, but I'm assuming when it gets ready to go to whatever committee, that if people pay attention to your site, not to mention, I know you're going to put it on Facebook, but it's real important that people understand that bills in Tennessee, probably like a lot of, they live or die in committee. Okay.
Amen.
So when we find out that Bill X is going to be in the committee, at a minimum, you need to call the chairman of that committee, anybody else on there. And hey, look, the Republicans, it's a super majority, and that's of course super in number only. But if their phone is ringing off the wall on an issue, we have a much better chance of getting it through.
That's
right. And this isn't just an election integrity issue for us. This affects Second Amendment. This affects the life issue. This affects schools, because everything is decided at the ballot box, right? Your representation is decided at the ballot box. And so we are reaching across to all the grassroots across the state, not just people interested in elections, and saying, come alongside us and help us connect with our legislators, and let's be polite. Let's bring this to them. We just heard a great case this afternoon about how a group of grassroots stopped something called ranked choice voting in the state of Michigan, and it was really just because the grassroots stood up. And it's we the people that need to speak to our legislators and let them know this is what we want.
And
Absolutely.
So to your point, Dave, we definitely are here to ask for your viewers to support us with these bills. And so I always do a bill tracker, and share, where we're at with our bills on our weekly call. And I provide the phone numbers, the email addresses, the talking points, everything for anybody who wants to get engaged. And then we will have these on our website once they are ready to go live on the website. And then we will be pushing them out through social media. So we will be keeping an eye on the calendar. So we'll know when these bills are ready to get ready to be on the calendar to be heard. And we will be spending time between now and then continuing to equip. And we've been doing this for 4 years now, equipping our people on our weekly call the reasons behind, like, why is it important to go back to the precinct voting? And so we've been working on that education piece for a long time. We'll continue to work on that education piece so people know how to pick up the phone or write an email and say, please support this bill.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Are you more confident on the House side or Senate side for this legislation? Or is it 50-50?
I wouldn't be confident until it passes, to be honest with you. We've tried before, but this really is an America First agenda. We are supposed to be America First as a state. That's what that's what everybody tells us, from people running for governor all the way down to the chimney sweeper. And if we really are, then we need to get behind these, because these are supported overwhelmingly across the country. They're by the president, and we need to get it done and secure our elections and when you increase voter confidence, you increase voter turnout. That was proven in Georgia when they went to voter ID. Everybody said, oh, you're going to disenfranchise people. Nope, the voter turnout went up. So we want our people to have what they want. And these are things that they have said they want.
Any closing thoughts?
Well, we're grateful for the opportunity to be here, number one. Number two, we've heard the people of this state for 5 years ask for these things. There is a progression. We hope that they understand that, because you can't just scrap a machine without having the other pieces in place. And we're just asking in the final closing minutes here to get to our legislators that are listening and our election officials to get behind this. This is not rocket science. It is not some crazy thing. It is not just a Tennessee thing. This is what the American people want.
And pray.
And pray. Absolutely.
Yep.
Well, hey, you guys are always welcome. It's always good to have you on. I appreciate you taking the time. I appreciate what you do. And hey, I hope we get them through this year. And we'll have you back on, a little further along in session to give her an update and let everybody know how everything's going.
Yep.
Thanks, Dave.
Thank you so much, Dave. Thank you for having us. Appreciate it.
Thank you for coming on. You guys have a good night.
Yep. God bless.
Take care. God bless y'all. Well, we got a few announcements here. Just a few things to cover, some upcoming events. Monty Fritz, running for governor, if you haven't heard, he will be as a matter of fact, this Monday, January 19th, at the New Moon Restaurant, 711 Park Avenue in Lebanon, Tennessee, from 1 to 3:15 p.m. Okay, that's a good chance. And also, if you can't make it, you still need to at least go look at his website. If you really don't know much about him, go check out his website. That's fritz4tn.com. He will also be in, there's a second event that day. Also, there's a meet and greet in the Mount Juliet Del Webb area at 4 p.m. This event will require an RSVP from the host to ensure there is space available. Contact Rick Julian at 630-730-2009 if you cannot attend the 1 p.m. event, or if you just prefer to go to the 4 p.m. event. And then on January the 27th, he'll be at the Jackson County GOP at the New Hope Baptist Church at 6 p.m. This is January 27th, 6 p.m. New Hope Baptist Church, 311 North Murray Street, Gainesboro, Tennessee. And on the 31st, and we don't have a flyer for this, but on the 31st of January, 6:30 p.m. in Clarksville, he will be at Lucille's Cafe, and that's at 2231 Madison Street, 6:30 p.m. And so we hope to see you there as well. Hey guys, we are trying to get to we need 1,000 subscribers. We're at 8 something right now, and we really need help getting to 1,000. Hey, it doesn't cost anything to join. You know, it doesn't cost you anything. So we really need to get to 1,000. That will help us offset some of the cost of doing this. Okay, because you know, this is the land of the free, but nothing's really free. Everything costs something. So we'd appreciate that if we could get to the 1,000. That would be great. So if you haven't subscribed, please subscribe. Hit the like button. Tell your friends about us. Now, this coming Monday, we're going to have another great show. If you're familiar with Real ID, or if you're not familiar with Real ID, you need to know about it. Okay, so we're going to have two ladies on here who are just very, very well informed. Karen Bracken, who's a friend, lady, it's amazing what that lady knows. Now, I don't know Twyla Brace, but from what I understand, she's very well informed on this topic as well as many others. But there's going to be legislation in Tennessee this year in this session, and we're trying to push back on the Real ID. Real ID. Real ID is a problem. It's something that you really need to be concerned about. And so they will be on Monday, 7 p.m. And so make sure you tune in for that. It should be a great show. And then the second show, we'll have Frederico Lyons. He's got a new book out, Road to Liberty, bringing an end to the 16th and 17th unprincipled amendments. And, you know, I think everybody would agree if we need to get rid of the 16th Amendment. I would say we need to get rid of the 17th as well, but should be interesting. We'll hear what he has to say and his reasons why we need to get rid of them and maybe how we can go about doing that. So tune in. Those two shows are next week. We will also have a show, and I don't have a flyer for this, just give you a heads up. We'll also have a show next Wednesday with Bernadette Fager, and we'll be talking about the pesticide bill, but we'll get a flyer out on that for Monday. So you can we'll show you a little bit more about it. But hey, once again, thanks for tuning in. We appreciate you. Hey, spread the word. Like I say, subscribe, spread the word. And thank you. And that's it for tonight. Good night. I can't say good night from Paris because I'm not in Paris tonight, but good night from Tennessee.